This section is a continuation of what we were doing right before break, where we were talking about the Industrial Revolution. Well, not right before break, because right before break you were all writhing in misery over your finals, but right before break. I am recording this. Oh no.
Sweet.
So, we're going to talk about, okay then, right? Or is it okay so?
Okay, so.
Okay, so, we're going to spread industry this semester. Spreading industry or okay so? Oh, all right. So, what you are looking at here is the spread of injury.
Yes.
It's going to be a long day.
No, don't start over. That's exciting. Oh no, you can't start over now.
The spread of industry. And we've already got Great Britain up here on the board because they've already industrialized. Yay! Who else could we have up here that is a continental European nation that's already industrialized? Yes, Belgium. Very good. Very good. All right. Do you suppose there's any significance to the colors?
We mentioned it.
There probably is. We'll see if you can figure it out. Okay. The United States appears up here because we will industrialize. Now, what kinds of things did Britain have to have in order for them to industrialize? They had to have abundant natural resources. They had to have adequate capital. They had to have people to work in the factories and buy the goods. They had to have a good internal transportation network, be it natural waterways, canals, eventually choo-choo trains. Okay? And it doesn't hurt to have good ports so that they can trade as well. You're missing a big one. Even if I have adequate capital, I have to have a stable government and peace, very good, in order to get people to invest that adequate capital. I'm not throwing my money out there if I think that an invading army is just going to burn the factory down. Okay? So the United States does have those abundant resources. Wow, that is tiny. I'll work on that for next time. Sorry, abundant resources. This will be up on the blog, so you can go and look at it there with your magnifying glass. Looks fine here. Okay. We also have the stable government, the peace, the adequate population, the adequate capital. We've got all of that stuff. And we have something that Britain didn't have. Well, that's going to be a big kick in the pants for us, yes. But we have Britain's example to follow. They've already done the hard work. All we have to do is recruit the engineers or steal the plans or pay somebody off to come over and build our first factories so that we can learn from what's already been done. So we industrialize. Our process of industrialization is more rapid than Britain's because we didn't have to go through all of those learning how to walk and talk and feed yourself stages. We just jumped right to being an obnoxious teenager. I was thinking of you, Miss Cell Phone. All right, who else follows that same pattern that the United States did? Germany, that is correct. And I'm calling them Germany up here, although when Germany begins its industrialization, they aren't yet Germany. This should probably more properly say Germanic states, because we're talking Prussia, Bavaria, and those dozens of principalities in between. So even though they don't have a unified stable government, individually they all have stable governments. And they've got a pretty good period of peace. They've certainly got the capital, a ton of natural resources, way more than England had, way more than Belgium had. They've got all it takes, and they too have the example of England to follow. Now we can assume that for everybody who's up here who's not Great Britain, they all have that British example to follow. But it's not going to be so easy for everybody. All of those pieces are critical, and if you're missing just one of them, industrialization isn't going to come together for your country. What do you suppose the red box is? What? Somebody who didn't what?
People that are already industrialized but isn't as successful.
Nope. Not people who have industrialized but aren't successful. It's people who don't industrialize. Russia. Now, what do you suppose Russia faces on the resource front? Oh, good grief. If you took all of Britain's and Belgium's and ours and Germany's natural resources, you would still not have as many as Russia has. Okay? They are swimming in natural resources. And yet, they don't industrialize. What are they lacking? Well, they have, and this is I struggled with what to call this bullet point. They have a stable government. The Romanov dynasty and the Tsar or Tsarina have been ruling forever. But what they lack is a stable political situation. That's kind of how I went at it. And it's part politics and part kind of social dynamics. Remember, in Russia, you've got the monarchy and the nobility, and you've got, clear down at the bottom, everybody else, and very little in between, right? If ever a country was ripe for revolution, I mean, if you look at how much disparity there was in France and how quickly they got to revolution, think about Russia. Why were they not revolting way before France even? Well, because the Russians and censorship kept the Enlightenment stuff from filtering down to the people. They didn't allow an educated pseudo-middle class to develop. Okay. Catherine the Great has a really good strong fist on this. Remember when we talked about her as an enlightened despot and how she was thinking about reform and then the peasants rebelled and she was like, oh, whoa, no reform. Okay, what emerges in countries that do industrialize? A middle class. You get this working class that develops who are wealthier than the peasants on the farms. And then you get a middle class, the factory managers, the merchants, the bookkeepers, those folks. If Russia allowed a middle class to develop, do you think Russia would have stayed Russia for very long? No way. So, although Russia has most of the parts, they lack the will to industrialize because they fear the consequences of industrialization. And it's not where they choose to put their capital. They choose to put their capital into an army to keep the people down and to keep the monarchy living in grand style. Okay. The blue one, it's odd. It's not green for yes, it's not red for no. If I could have found a color somewhere between green and red, I'd have gone with that, but when I did the gradient thing, it was just icky looking. So, Japan falls here. And Japan is the only one in blue because their story of industrialization is really weird. All of these countries have tremendous abundant natural resources. Japan has like none. What do we know about the Japanese islands geologically? What? They're isolated. What are they made of? They're volcanic islands. They're made of basalt, some of the hardest stone on Earth. Like hot lava, cold ocean, rock, boom. Okay. Volcanoes do not vomit forth coal deposits or iron deposits. It's hard to even grow anything on a volcanic island. Okay? Soil has to have filtered in there over time. So, what do the Japanese use to industrialize? What do the Japanese, if you think of Japan and you think, I'm going to take a vacation to Japan, what are you thinking you're going to be eating?
Sushi.
Sushi. What is sushi?
Fish.
Well, Japan is an island in the ocean, or a series of islands in the ocean, right? So, okay, fish. Well, how do you go fishing? You get into A boat. So what do you suppose Japan has a lot of?
Ports.
And where do fishing boats go when they're not at sea fishing? Where do you build docks? Good natural ports. Japan has lots and lots of good natural ports. Yes, you can launch fishing fleets from ports. Wow, say fishing fleets from ports fast. Fishing fleets from ports. You can launch them from ports, but what else could you dock in those ports? Trading vessels. Very good. Okay, if we don't have the resources, we can buy the resources, right? How did Britain get their resources that they didn't have on their islands? Trade with who? Their colonies, right? Mercantilism, do you remember that word from first semester? That idea that I take the natural resources and then I sell the finished goods? Well, Japan, pretty much by the time they decide to open their country back up, because you remember Japan had kind of said, all right, you guys outside influences are disruptive to us, and they closed their country. By the time they decide to open back up, everything's pretty much taken. Okay, so colonies are out of the question. But Japan also lacked a stable government. Do you remember when we talked about them and the samurai and the daimyo and the warring states period? And how they were constantly fighting for supreme power and how the shogun actually had the power? Well, the warring states period is still going on. So not only do I not have resources, but I don't have any money because I'm spending it all to keep fighting the other daimyo. I don't have a government, so industrialization really isn't going to happen. But then there's a massive political change in Japan. Big political change. A shogun comes forth and he creates a new government called the Meiji government. Did that go too fast? M-E-I-J-I. The Meiji government. It's not in your book, Ethan. You're going to want to write it down. And this is going to be a really stable government. And the first emperor says, we got to industrialize because we're way behind. And so he puts everything that Japan has towards industrializing their nation. And they, despite their lack of resources, they industrialize uber fast. Like, really fast. Because they had capital. Once they quit spending it to kill each other on civil wars, no problem. Now, if you don't have resources and you have to buy them, can you still be profitable in industrializing? Absolutely, because no matter what, your finished goods are going to be worth more than your raw goods. Hopefully, unless you stink at making stuff, right? Okay. There are a bunch of other nations that also industrialized during this time. We're going to talk about 3 of them real quickly here. Australia, Canada, New Zealand. Now these guys have something in common with one another. And that is correct, Alex. They are all British colonies. Now, I just talked about mercantilism, right? Mercantilism. Why would Britain allow her colonies, who are supposed to be providing raw materials, why would Britain allow them to industrialize? Because they can make more money. It's a long ways from Britain to Australia and New Zealand, isn't it? And if Australia and New Zealand can make some finished goods and sell those straight to the Asian markets, instead of sending the raw material all the way back to Britain to be run through factories, and then having to ship those finished goods clear back halfway around the world, there's more profit in it, right? And they're still British, they're part of the Commonwealth, the money's still coming home to the king. Okay, progress. Why is this one black? They do not industrialize. Okay? They don't industrialize, at least not during this time period. China. China has natural resources coming out of their ears. Do they have adequate population in China? Yeah. Coming out of the ears of their ears of their ears, right? They've got people on people on people. Okay. Do they have a stable government? Well, they had the Ming Empire, and the Mings were conquered by the Qings, and the Qings will be there until the last emperor of China in the 19-teens. Okay. Stable government? Yeah. Yeah. Do they have adequate capital? They do. I'll just tell you that one. They do. So why doesn't China industrialize? They've got all of the ingredients. What did we know about China the last time we studied them? What did Lord Macartney hear from the Chinese emperor? Not Lord McCartney, sorry. I'm forgetting his name. He was told to kowtow to the emperor.
I know who you're talking
What did China say? Yeah, what we have is better than what you have. Your stuff is crap. We don't want it. And then what did China do? Said get out, wouldn't let her own people leave, wouldn't let foreigners come in, basically. Closed the doors and said, we're on our own. China doesn't industrialize because China doesn't want to industrialize. China doesn't see the need. China hasn't had anything to do with the rest of the world by and large part, other than in those few trading ports. We're fine. Why change? If you're living in a cabin in the woods out north of the Arctic Circle in Alaska, and you're surviving and doing fine, are you really concerned that you don't have an iPad? What do you need it for? I don't have internet, so what do I need an iPad for, right? I don't have cable, do I need a plasma screen TV? No. So China doesn't know what it could get from industrializing. They don't want to. Okay. China's different than the other nation we're going to use as an example here, Italy. Now, Italy, like Germany, at this point is not a nation. But even when they do become a nation in the 1890s, they won't be able to industrialize. Italy has natural resources, they've got population, they'll get to a stable-ish government, they'll have capital, they have good ports. For them, it's geography and geology. They lack the internal transportation structure. Picture in your head, and I'll try and do it backwards for you, the peninsula of Italy, right? The boot. Okay. What made that boot? Why is it just sticking out there south of Europe? What? It is mountainous. The Dolomites. Okay. Heard of Mount Etna? Etna? Made the island of Sicily. How about Mount Vesuvius in the city of Pompeii? Okay. All mountains, all down the spine of the Italian peninsula. Well, is it easy to build a road over mountains? Nope. Running out of mountains, what do you often get? Water. Lots of rivers and streams. Okay? So traveling north and south on either side of the Italian peninsula, you got to have a lot of bridges. Okay? The transportation internally within Italy is so bad that when it comes to invading Italy during World War II, the U.S. doesn't plan, okay, we'll invade here and conquer this, and then we'll just cross the mountains and conquer over there. They plan a dual-sided landing because it's so hard to get up and over. So they don't have a good railroad system. For a long time in Italy, if you were on the East Coast and you wanted to go to the West, you wouldn't head inland up over the mountains. You'd rather get on a ship and sail around. It would be far more comfortable and most times faster. Okay. So moving raw materials and moving finished goods was very, very difficult for them. Thank you. Okay. Yes. Here we are stealing for industrialization. Is it possible to industrialize without the Bessemer process? Yeah, absolutely. They had steel before Bessemer came up with his process. Well, if they had steel, and you could industrialize with that steel, then why do we make such a big stinking deal out of Henry Bessemer? The answer is this. Bessemer's steel, or the steel made with his process, is way stronger. It is far more durable. It is much lighter. And it is tremendously easier to produce. So if you're going to end up with a better, stronger, more durable product that's easier to produce and cheaper, you're going to switch to that, right? Everybody switches to it. And it changes the world, literally. Bessemer steel gives us longer spans of bridges, gives us taller buildings, gives us railroad tracks that don't wear out as fast, gives us wheels on the locomotives that don't wear out as fast. You can do anything with Bessemer steel because it is so much lighter and stronger. You cannot overstate the importance of Bessemer's process to the rapid growth and spread of industrialization. The fact that it's so much cheaper lets some of those borderline, could they industrialize, could they not nations, get over that hump. Okay. Better living through chemistry. Learning how to manipulate the world around us has always been a sign of mankind's progress. When you get back into ancient history, we name the ages by the tools that they have. The Copper Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age. Okay? You could call the Industrial Age the Steel Age, I suppose. But that would be understating it, because what the chemists did on the heels of those scientific revolution guys is pretty astounding. We're going to just highlight a few, but there are entire sets of books written about the chemical and chemist innovations that occur during and as a result of the Industrial Revolution. This fella is Alfred Nobel, the inventor of dynamite. Okay, great, big deal. He liked to blow stuff up. Why did Alfred Nobel make such an impact to the Industrial Revolution? How did we blow stuff up before Nobel and his invention? Gunpowder, okay? Gunpowder works, except it takes a lot of it to be very effective. You can't really shape a charge with gunpowder, and if it gets damp, no good. If the fuse is at all weak, no good. Okay? It's hard to time the fuse sometimes with gunpowder, so you might blow yourself up, or you might sit there twiddling your thumbs waiting for it to blow up for so long that you get impatient and you go over just as, boom, right? Okay? So, what about after gunpowder? We stopped blowing stuff up with just gunpowder. Nitroglycerin, the clear liquid. Anybody ever watched an old Western? Or somebody's like, here, take this box. And the guy's like, what's in it? He's like, I got it. What is it? Nitroglycerin. Nitroglycerin blows up at any kind of jostling or jarring. Okay? Why were they using explosives a lot during the Industrial Revolution?
Mining.
Mining and railroads. If you've got to build railroads through the mountains, you either want to do tunnels or you've got to carve off a chunk so you can build your rail flat. Okay? Well, would you want to be the guy picked to drive the wagon up the mountainside full of nitroglycerin? Because he's not driving it up a 6-lane asphalt paved highway, right? Can you even imagine? Have you seen enough old westerns to imagine how terrifying that is? Okay, so Alfred Nobel develops this non-volatile compound. Non-volatile means it doesn't blow up until you intend for it to. This non-volatile compound, TNT, dynamite. Okay? You can set a fuse and decide how long it blows up. You can compound the dynamite and make the explosion bigger. You can cut it and make it smaller. It's very controllable. You can shape what direction it explodes in. Nobel becomes fabulously wealthy. And then mankind figures out that his product can be used for things other than mining and construction. And we start using his product on each other. And Nobel is so traumatized by this use of dynamite to kill mankind that he takes all of this fabulous wealth and he creates an institute and donates all of his money to it. And that is the same group that still today awards the Nobel Peace Prize, which is the first one he said that he wanted. And there's also Nobel Prizes in chemistry and physics and literature and economics and all kinds of different prizes. And they come with a pretty good little cash award and the fancy medal. Okay. All because of his guilt. If he hadn't developed it, somebody else would have, right? Probably. This handsome devil, Charles Goodyear. Somebody usually at this point exclaims, tires? No, he's not in your book. Tires? Well, not tires for Charles Goodyear. Vulcanization. Vulcan, like Spock's planet. V-U-L-C-A-N. Vulcanization. It's the process where you take that sap from the rubber tree, that raw sap, and you harden it and you manipulate it with chemicals and you make it more durable. Okay? If the same sap from the rubber tree is what the Indians were chewing, chicle, if we tried to mold that into rings and then run it on our roads, how long do you think we'd be able to drive? Right? Without Charles Goodyear and his process of vulcanization, you wouldn't be shopping for 30,000 or 40,000 or 50,000 mile tires. You'd be lucky to get a 5-mile tire. Okay? Goodyear doesn't manufacture tires, but his name is used by the folks who start the Goodyear Tire Company in 1898. So that's why you associate him with tires. It's because vulcanization is a major process of tire making. Vulcanization is kind of the Bessemer process of tire making, tire manufacturing. Okay? He was just hardening rubber to make sealants, to make flasks, all kinds of stuff. He was an experimenter. Yes, Victoria.
So was he popular for it or not until they started?
Oh yeah, there were a lot of other uses for rubber. Waterproofing, raincoats, boots, all sorts of stuff. Hoses. Okay. Justus von Liebig. Also not in your book. I'm pulling out some strange guys here for you. Justus von Liebig. Now von Liebig is up here because he is a tremendously significant German chemist. Von Liebig doesn't do something that no one's ever done before. He does it differently and better. Okay? Von Liebig was looking at the process of fertilization. Right? Have your animals go poop in the field. When you scoop the stalls, go spread it around in the field, right? More crops grow in the fields I do that in. Gee, something must be going on. So von Liebig studies the chemical process that occurs with the breakdown of manure and works to discover why that makes plants grow better. The world's population is ever growing, right? And yet animals only produce so much manure in a given day. And we have more and more and more fields to fertilize. Von Liebig says perhaps through chemistry we can duplicate or even improve on what the animals do for us with their manure. He is the first to suggest the use of chemical fertilizers and to produce them. And you, living here in Nebraska, those of you who are fans of the corn huskers, should also be fans of Justus von Liebig. Even if you're a fan of the Hawkeyes, Iowa is the top pork producing nation in the state, and what do you suppose those piggies eat? Corn. Okay. Oh, too soon? Okay. Progress always sparks change. What do you suppose we're going to talk about now? Electricity? Yes, absolutely. That's a very bright idea. I hope I don't shock you with all of these puns. Okay. This handsome fella is Michael Faraday. Anybody taking physics? You're probably too young to take physics yet. When you take physics, you're going to study Mr. Faraday, because he invents the first electric motor. That's all well and good. Brilliant work. Wonderful stuff. You could power anything that would run, anything mechanical that would operate with an electric motor. But what we lacked when Faraday invented his electric motor was something to power the electric motor with. So Faraday, not one to give up, goes and invents the dynamo. It generates the electricity to run his little electric motor. Michael Faraday is tremendously significant because this dynamo, the basic ideas and constructs of its design are still in use today. We've made them bigger, we've made them more efficient, we use slightly different materials, but the principles upon which the dynamo was built have not changed. When you go home today and flip on the light switch, a dynamo built on Faraday's principles is producing the electricity that's powering your house. And I know that that's true because Fort Calhoun's still shut down. So, all right. So everybody who comes after Faraday and uses electricity owes him. Who's the most famous guy you think of when you think of electricity? Thomas Edison. Couldn't have done a thing without Faraday and his dynamo. By the way, if they're blue and they're in the section, you need to know them, even though I'm not talking about them. Okay. All right, interchangeability and mass production. This is important stuff. Eli Whitney very often gets the credit for interchangeable parts. Prior to the American Civil War, Eli Whitney had 12 guns manufactured, and he went before the American Congress. He did a demonstration where he took those guns apart in all of their pieces and mixed them up in a big old pile. The parts weren't labeled, which one went to gun 1, 1, 2, gun 3, okay? And he reassembled those 12 guns before Congress. Why is that a big deal? Because before Eli Whitney did that, when a gunsmith sat down to make a gun, he made a gun. And when he was done with it, he would make another gun. And if the trigger on gun 1 broke, he couldn't just take a trigger he had laying on the bench and pop it in there and have it be done. Everything was handmade individually. Okay? If you at home, how many of you have to vacuum at home? Right? Okay. Anybody have a vacuum that has a bag still? Okay. What happens to the bag? It gets full. And you have to take it out and you have to put another one in. Do you have to stop and sit and sew that bag before you can put it in? No, because you bought a package of several bags off of the rack full of several packages of several bags at the store. All because Eli Whitney came up with that idea of interchangeable parts, but he's not the one who perfects it for mass production. Folks will keep working on this idea and keep working on this idea. And by the 1870s, it will be largely implemented in the manufacture of sewing machines by the name of a guy named Singer. So if a needle broke, if a belt broke, if a bobbin pin broke, you could simply go and replace that one part instead of having to buy a whole new thing. Pretty huge. The interesting thing that I was thinking about as I was putting this slideshow together is we're almost getting away from that now. From these interchangeable parts. What do you do if your TV breaks now? Right. How many TV repair shops are there still around? There used to be an entire industry, radio and television repairmen. They had to know all about vacuum tubes and signals, and yeah, you just go buy a new one. My laptop, if the battery goes bad, guess what I have to go do? Well, I have to take it to Apple because they don't trust me to replace an interchangeable part on my own. Okay? What if your iPad breaks or your iPod breaks? You tend to buy a new one, right? Yep. We don't have a lot of interchangeable parts anymore. How many of you have a car in the family that's been bought new or newish in the last 2-3 years? Okay. Come with a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty or a 5-year, 50,000-mile warranty or something? You know why? Because, especially if it's a drivetrain warranty, they're talking about the transmission there. Because that transmission is sealed. And if you open it up to alter it, you void that warranty. Why? Because they build it so well that it shouldn't need any interchangeable parts replaced or repaired. And then after it's done its 100,000 miles, if it does, the odds are that financially it'll make more sense to get a new one. Okay. We are now able to manufacture so well that parts don't break, so we don't need the interchangeability as much as we used to. Okay? Who do we usually give the credit for really using interchangeable parts in mass production very well for the first time? Ford. Henry Ford, absolutely. Mass production of automobiles on an assembly line. Yes. Massive change in production. We'd already had the Industrial Revolution by the time Ford starts building his cars in Dearborn, Michigan. But he does it so efficiently with the interchangeable parts on the assembly line. You could plug another worker in and not lose any time in production. Henry Ford used to joke that you could buy a Model T in any color so long as it was black. Do you know why Model Ts were all black? That was the paint color that dried the fastest. And so it didn't slow down production. Any other color would have, allowing people to choose colors would have slowed down production, and any other color dried slower. And so it would have limited his ability to produce on a massive, massive scale. Kind of cool, huh? Okay. What kind of business was the Ford Motor Company? It was a corporation. A corporation is where individual people can buy shares of stock. And that stock certificate says, I own an itsy beansy teeny weeny little tiny piece of this corporation. And the reason corporations are nice is because I don't have to have all of the money to start a business myself. And I don't have to have two friends who have enough money to start the business themselves. All I have to do is convince a whole bunch of people that it's worth risking a little bit of money to buy a share of stock to let me set my company up. Okay? We also have a situation now where I may have started a company and it's a small company, and in order to grow it big, then I choose to turn it into a corporation and use that sale of stock to give me the money that it takes to expand. Okay? Advantages of being a shareholder in a corporation: if the corporation goes bankrupt, what have you lost? Only what you spent on the stock that you bought, right? If you own stock in an airline, and simultaneously on the same day, all of that airline's planes explode in midair, and it's found that it's because they weren't maintaining them well, what are the families of the survivors or the families of the dead going to do? Sue. They're going to sue. And that company's going to end up not existing because they'll pay out everything in damages, right? What happens to you as a shareholder in that company? You're part owner. Your liability in the company stops at that share. They can't come and get your house and your income from you. Okay? So yes, you've lost the money you invested in the company, but they're not going to take the rest of it from you. If it was just my airline and it wasn't a corporation, they'd take everything I have. Make sense? So your profit as a shareholder is unlimited. Theoretically, you can make as much money as you want to make. And your ability to lose money is limited based on how much you choose to risk and invest. Kind of a genius mentality. And the creation of this concept of corporation and the laws that allow corporations to be created really helps to fuel continued industrialization and production of consumer goods in particular. Okay. Questions about things that I have not talked about that I thought the book covered pretty well? Yes, the Wright brothers are definitely on your quiz. So is Marconi. What? Okay, capitalism is the idea that whatever resources I have, I can use them however I want to profit for myself. And if I can talk other people out of their money, I can make them rich as well. Robber barons are these folks who come along and really pay people less than their resources are worth, and they kind of grab up businesses and resources and profit tremendously from them without really sharing the wealth. In early American history, there's a lot of robber barons that we talk about. Some people talk about Carnegie and Vanderbilt as robber barons. I think you need a good study of American history to really know whether or not they were. And still, it's kind of a social and a political determination as to whether or not they were, because there weren't laws against it, which is why we began to get some regulations of business and some folks who said, you know what, it's not okay to do things the way you've been doing it. Perhaps we should put a guard on that blade so your workers don't chop their hands off so easily. That kind of stuff only comes about after egregious harm has been done generally. Other questions? Okay, I'll get this exported and up on the blog for you. Quiz tomorrow, I think, is about 22 points. Yeah, 22 points, and it's It's 17, 18 questions maybe, something like that. Okay, good luck.